As we were coming in here, groping around the one-way streets to get into Memorial Hall, we passed a little chamber right underneath you which says Psychoacoustic Laboratory. That's where speakers go who can't be heard, who displease. Some of them never appear again, so you better hear me. When you read, you find sometimes you're coupled with strange people that it doesn't always come out too well. But I've always been very lucky in that, and I'm very pleased to read with Mr. Alfred tonight. And it was about 5 years ago that I read his first play, The Agamemnon, in manuscript, and I admired that so much that I maneuvered to be introduced to him, and we became very fast friends. And the play that he's going to read tonight I've known for about a year now, and it'd be quite impertinent for me to give any critique of it, but I want to say something that won't be just the usual sort of praise for a companion, that I don't believe there's a play, a poetic play in verse by an American that's comparable to this one, that its power of humor and tragedy both mix, that seems to me, and I feel it's an extraordinary privilege and to precede the play. That I like to chatter about my poems a little bit, and some people like that and some don't, and some like the chatter much better than the poems, and so on. And once I read at the Poets Theater, and I thought I was rather good, except I arrived half an hour late, and tried to make up for that by outdoing myself. And after it was over, I met John Holmes, the poet, and he said that was pretty good. He said, you know, the best comments I ever heard on a poet make was John Brennan, who said, I'm going to read 10 poems. They're 450 lines, and that was all he said. I'll read 8 poems, and maybe less if they take too long, and 2 are rather long and the others aren't. This one's, the first 2 I'm reading have to do with the famous New England preacher Jonathan Edwards, and I want to tell a story on Mr. Tate, if I dare look beyond him, and because I don't think I ever discovered I was in New England until I got to know Mr. Tate, and I may be a sort of southern New Englander, that there's something adulterate in this that improved on perhaps from the original stock. But long ago, Mr. Tate and I and our wives all had a house together, and all 4 people were writing books. And Mr. Tate was going to write a novel, and I was going to write a biography of Jonathan Edwards. And we started with great éclat. We built a bookcase together to keep our stuff in order. We put up a screen so we wouldn't disturb each other. And we sat down to work, and somehow things didn't quite go that way. The ladies' typewriters going all day, and 3 pages were finished every day by each of them and rewritten 4 or 5 times. And I and Mr. Tate were very silent, and there was no sound of typewriter, and badminton games interrupted us. And finally, after 2 months, Mr. Tate all in one morning did 5 pages, and I felt utterly deserted. But that never happened again. There's a masterpiece in the making. That's a 5-page novel that's been started, and I didn't get that far. That I got as far as buying Calvin's Institutes, and ancient edition of Jonathan Edwards' works that came off on my clothes, and I hit his massive production on freedom of the will, and I stopped. He told you there was no freedom, and I didn't find any to continue. Well, then we wrote poems, and that's a good way to write. Tackle something you can't do, and then maybe you can write poems. This is called After the Surprising Conversions. It's about the great religious revival all over the country, and particularly around here, that took place about 1730 or 40 when Whitefield was over here. And Edwards was a scholarly, dry man and a mystic, and not the sort of person you'd think would encourage this, but he went in for it, and he felt this did good. And he had one of the best minds of his age, I think. He made some of Berkeley's improvements on Locke, and yet he supported the revival, and I think he largely did it to get a dig in at Harvard College. That there are very staid theologians here then that didn't approve of enthusiasm. But the revival didn't go too well. People got converted, then they went cold. And this is about a young man, very New England, introverted character, who got religion during the revival, and then he cut his throat, and that had to be explained by Edwards, and this is his letter to the church in Boston. Surprising is he called his book that, and he meant it was surprisingly good, but this was another surprise. September 22nd. Sir, today I answer, in the latter part of May, hard on our Lord's ascension, it began to be more sensible, a gentleman of more than common understanding, strict in morals, pious in behavior, kicked against our goad. A man of some renown, and useful, honored person in the town, he came of melancholy parents, prone to secret spells, for years they kept alone. His uncle, I believe, was killed of it. Good people, but of too much or little wit. I preached one Sabbath on a text from Kings. He showed concernment for his soul. Some things in his experience were hopeful. He would sit and watch the wind knocking a tree and praise this countryside our Lord has made. Once when a poor man's heifer died, he laid a shilling on the doorsill. Though a thirst for loving shook him like a snake, he durst not entertain much hope of his estate in heaven. Once we saw him sitting late behind his attic window by a light that guttered on his Bible. Through that night he meditated terror, and he seemed beyond advice or reason, for he dreamed that he was called to trumpet judgment day to Concord. In the latter part of May he cut his throat. And though the coroner judged him delirious, soon a noisome stir palsied our village. At Jehovah's nod, Satan seemed more let loose amongst us. God abandoned us to Satan, and he pressed us hard until we thought we could not rest till we had done with life. Content was gone. All the good work was quashed. We were undone. The breath of God had carried out a planned and sensible withdrawal from this land. The multitude, once unconcerned with doubt, once neither callous, curious, nor devout, jumped at broad noon as though some peddler groaned at it in its familiar twang. My friend, cut your own throat, cut your own throat. Now. September 22nd. Sir, the bough cracks with the unpicked apples, and at dawn the small-mouthed bass breaks water, gorged with spawn. second poem is called Mr. Edwards and the Spider, and there's a queer thing about Edwards that as a boy he was interested in spiders, and he wrote a beautiful piece of rather Baroque 17th century prose describing them, and it's a lovely scene. He saw these spiders drifting above trees in the warm sunlight, and something like the snakes in the Coleridge's Ancient Mariner. It's a voluptuous scene. And but Edwards is already perhaps headed for theology, and he said, now, you see God's providence in this, that the spiders are being swept out to the Atlantic Ocean where they'll be exterminated, else they'd overrun the earth. Well, he rather gave up looking at things directly and describing them. He became a more abstract thinker as he developed, and yet the spider image keeps coming up in his sermons, that he's not the hellfire creature he's made out to be, but there are quite a few of those, and a favorite image is the spider. That's what it'll be like if you don't do right here after you depart. And I've tried to combine the early Edward spider with the late spider. And it's a charming poem, as you can see. I saw the spiders marching through the air, swimming from tree to tree that mildewed day in latter August when the hay came creaking to the barn. But where the wind is westerly, where gnarled November makes the spiders fly into the apparitions of the sky, they purpose nothing but their ease and die, urgently beating east to sunrise in the sea. What are we in the hands of the great God? It was in vain you set up thorn and briar and battle array against the fire and treason crackling in your blood, for the wild thorns grow tame and will do nothing to oppose the flame. Your lacerations tell the losing game you play against a sickness past your cure. How will the hands be strong? How will the heart endure? A very little thing, a little worm or hourglass blazoned spider, it is said, can kill a tiger. Will the dead hold up his mirror and affirm to the four winds the smell and flash of his authority? It's well if God, who holds you to the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider, will destroy, baffle, and dissipate your soul. As a small boy on the Windsor Marsh, I saw the spider die when thrown into the bowels of fierce fire. There's no long struggle, no desire to get up on its feet and fly. It stretches out its feet and dies. This is the sinner's last retreat. Yes, and no strength exerted on the heat-thin sinews the abolished will, when sick and full of burning, it will whistle on a brick. But who can plumb the sinking of the soul? Sinner, oh brother, picture yourself cast into a brick kiln where the blast fans your quick vitals to a coal. If measured by a glass, how long would it seem burning? Let there pass a minute, 10 trillion, but the blaze is infinite, eternal. This is death, to die and know it. This is the Black Widow, death. It's called Her Dead Brother, and it's a little melodrama. And as near as I ever got to doing a play, that it's about a good subject, I think. That it's about a sister who's in love with her brother, and it's a monologue, and she's married, and her brother's in the Navy, and he's been killed in the war, and the war is still going on, and it's in two short sections. The first section, the sister reflects on her childhood, and it comes to a close when she hears her husband driving up the driveway. And in the second section, you imagine a few months to have passed, and despair has come on her, and she's committing suicide by turning on the gas, and has hallucinatory images of the fleet coming into the harbor with her brother on it, and so it ends, and so she ends. And I was once talking to Auden, I think I was in the middle of this, and incest came up, and he said, "I've never understood that subject." And what's it mean? And that troubled me. He listed a lot of other subjects that he did think had meaning, and horror too, but that sort of graveled me, and I'd been planning a rather long poem on this subject, and I had to expurgate it. Well, I suppose incest means the next best thing to loving yourself. It's a form of narcissism. Her dead brother, she speaks the poem. The St. Mark's in the first line isn't a Venetian scene, but St. Mark's boarding school, my alma mater. However, the girl in this poem's not an acquaintance of mine. It's sunset, and the lion of St. Mark's upon the glass shield in my window reddens as the night enchants the swinging doors to its terrors, and dulls your distant wind-stung eyes. Alas, your portrait coiled in German silver hawsers mirrors the sunset as a dragon. Enough light remains to see you through your varnish. Giving your life has brought you closer to your friends. Yes, it has brought you home. All's well that ends. Achilles dead is greater than the living. My mind holds you as I would have you live, a wintering dragon. Summer was too short when we went picnicking with telescopes and cracking leather handbooks to that fort above the lank and heron sheepscot where its slopes are clutched by hemlock spotting birds. I give you back that idol, brother. Was it more? Remember riding, scotching with your spur that 4-foot milk snake in a juniper? Father shellacked it to the ice house door. Then you were grown. I left you on your own. We will forget that August 23rd when Mother motored with the maids to Stowe, and the pale summer shades were drawn so low no one could see us, know nor catch your hissing word as false as cressid. Let our deaths atone. The fingers on your sword knot are alive, and hope that fouls my brightness with its grace will anchor in the narrows of your face. My husband's Packard crunches up the drive. Second part. Spring scene. The ice is out. The tidal current swims its blocks against the launches as they pitch under the cruisers of my brother's fleet. The gas uncoiling from my oven burners dims this bottle and its model boat, the Water Witch, a knockabout my brother fouled and left to eat its heart out by the Boston Light. My brother, I have saved you in the ice house of my mind. The ice is out. Our fingers lock behind the tiller. We're healing in the smother. Our sails, balloon and leg of mutton, tell the colors of the rainbow, but they flap as the wind fails and cannot fetch the bell. His stick is tapping on the mill wheel step. He lights a match, another and another. The Lord is dark and holy is his name. By my own hands into his hands. The burners sing like a kettle, and its nickel mirrors your squadron by the Stygian landing. Brother, the harbor, the torpedoed cruisers flame. The motor launches with their searchlights bristle about the targets. You are black. You shout and cup your broken sword hand. Yes, your whistle across the crackling water. Quick, the ice is out. The wind dies in our canvas. We are running dead before the wind. But now our sail is part of death. Oh, brother, a New England town is death and incest, and I saw it whole. I said, life is a thing I own. Brother, my heart races for sea room. We are out of breath. I don't have too much comic touch to offer, and the nearest I can get to it maybe is this, which sounds funnier than it is, called The Fat Man in the Mirror. And the character who speaks it grew up in the old regime in Austria. And that whole age has passed, and he looks at himself, and he's fat and hairy in the mirror. What's filling up the mirror? Oh, it is not I. Hair belly like a beaver's house, an old dog's eye. The forenoon was blue in the mad king's zoo. My nurse was swinging me so high, so high. The bullies wrestled on the royal bowling green, hammers and sickles on their hoods of black sateen. Sulking on my swing, the tobacco king sliced apples with a penknife for the queen. This I, who used to mouse about the paraffin preserves and jammed a finger in the coffee grinder, serves time before the mirror. But this Percy terror, nurse, it is a person, it is nerves. Where's the queen mother, waltzing like a top to staunch the blood of Louis, queen of Faery? Hip and haunch lard the royal grotto, straddling Louis' motto, time the Turk gets sickle on its paunch. Nurse, nurse, it rises on me. Oh, it starts to roll, my apples o'er ashes in the meerschaum bowl. If you'd only come, darling, if the apples that I stole while nurse and I were swinging in the old one's eye, only a fat man with his beaver on his eye, only a fat man bursts the mirror. Oh, it is not I. This is a good deal later poem, and it tries to be more, have its feet firmer in the world, and also, unfortunately, it's a subject that every poet of my generation has written on, and the generation of Fulbrights to Italy, that it's my Italian poem that. And that's a awfully worked quarry, I'm afraid. That it's called Beyond the Alps, and the title comes from Napoleon's proclamation to his army in 1797 before his first campaign, and you're probably familiar with this, that the army was in very bad shape. They were hungry for blood and ill-fed and ill-dressed, and he told them that and said, beyond the Alps lies Italy, where you can live on the land. And they did. But this isn't about Napoleon. That beyond the Alps is, I try to avoid symbolism, and this is a very elementary kind, that it's a monologue written while taking the train from Rome to Paris on the way home to America. And beyond the Alps has the meaning of going beyond nature. And I think of this as a sort of credo, but it's the opposite of a credo because I don't know what it means exactly. You've got to go beyond the Alps to exist at all, but to go very far beyond you in the ether. I take several examples. It begins with an account of a Swiss expedition to climb Mount Everest that had just failed at that time in 1949. Then I have Mussolini and Pope Pius, who's just declared the dogma of the Mary's bodily assumption, and then a picture of 5th century Athens, and finally I get into Paris. You've got a whole guidebook here. And I speak of Paris, this may be obscure, that it's a black classic. I think that our classics are the French art, I think, and they renewed poetry for us, and so many of them lived in the sort of underbelly of existence. You think of Baudelaire and Rimbaud and Verlaine, Céline, and so on, that the black it's not like the old Greek classics, though they were bloody enough too, but also the blackness of Paris in winter, the physical blackness. Reading how even the Swiss had thrown the sponge in once again, and Everest was still unscaled, I watched our Paris Pullman lunge mooning across the fallow alpine snow. Oh, bella Roma. Much against my will, I saw our trilingual Roman stewards go forward on tiptoe, banging on their gongs, leaving the city of God where it belongs. There the skirt-mad Mussolini unfurled the eagle of Caesar. He was one of us only, pure prose. I envy the conspicuous waist of our grandparents on their grand tours. Long-haired Victorian sages accepted the universe while breezing upon their trust funds through the world. When the Vatican made Mary's Assumption dogma, the crowds at San Pietro screamed, Papa. I'm not smearing the Holy Father, this is all true, that the Holy Father dropped his shaving glass and listened. His electric razor purred, his pet canary chirped on his left hand. The lights of science couldn't hold a candle to Mary risen at one miraculous stroke, angel-winged, gorgeous as a jungle bird. But who believed this? Who could understand? Pilgrims still kissed St. Peter's brazen sandal. The Duce's lynched, bare-booted skull still spoke. God herded his people to the coup de grace. The costumed Switzers sloped their pikes to push, O pious, through the monstrous human crush. My mountain climbing train had come to earth, tired by the querulous hush of the wheels. The blear-eyed ego kicking in my berth lay still, and saw Apollo plant his heels on terra firma through Aurora's thigh, fire-branded socket of the Cyclops' eye. O Machiavellian candor, charged with good, light of the Athenians when the goddess stood, prince, pope, philosopher, and golden bow, pure mind and murder at the scything prow, Minerva the miscarriage of the brain. Decipher Europe, vibrate through my pain. Now Paris, my black classic, breaking up like killer kings on an Etruscan cup. And I want to read a couple of quite recent poems that these are in rather different style, I think, and they're meant to be realistic and the meter's irregular, and they're meant to be understood. And they may be the result of a trip on the West Coast and hearing the beat people that however, I don't belong to that school either. That the first one has a very beautiful title. It's called Skunk Hour, and it takes off from a town where somewhere in Maine, and about 2 at night, you hear the top of your garbage can jump in the air, and skunks and coons are invading it. The skunk hour is a quiet hour. And this is a poem of affirmation as well as love of nature. That Skunk Hour. Nautilus Island's hermit heiress still lives through winter in her Spartan cottage. Her sheep still graze above the sea. Her son's a bishop. Her farmer is first selectman in our village. She's in her dotage, thirsting for the hierarchic privacy of Queen Victoria's century. She buys up all the eyesores facing her shore and lets them fall. The season's ill. We've lost our summer millionaire who seemed to leap from an LL Bean catalog. His 9-knot yawl was auctioned off to lobstermen. A red fox stain covers the blue hill. And now our fairy decorator brightens his shop for fall, his fish nets filled with orange cork, orange his cobbler's bench and all. There is no money in his work. He'd rather marry. One dark night, my Tudor Ford, it's spelled T-U-D-O-R and it means 2 doors. One dark night, my Tudor Ford climbed the hill's skull. I watched for love cars. Lights turned down, they lay together hull to hull where the graveyard shelves on the town. My mind's not right. A car radio bleats. Love, oh careless love. I hear my ill spirit sob in each blood cell as if my hand were at its throat. I myself am hell, nobody's here. Only skunks that search in the moonlight for a bite to eat. They march on their souls up Main Street, white stripes, moonstruck eyes, red fire, under the chalk dry and sparse spire of the Trinitarian Church. I stand on top of our back steps and breathe the rich air. A mother skunk with her column of kittens swills the garbage pail. She jabs her wedge head in a cup of sour cream, drops her ostrich tail, and will not scare. Do you come out all right? I'll just read one more. That this is a poem of nostalgia that, it's called Memories of West Lepke. And some of you don't remember Lepke, that it's Louis Lepke who was head of Murder Incorporated. And during the war, excuse me for giving this autobiographical information, but it would help you follow the poem, that I was a conscientious objector and I didn't fall into the right categories and I went to jail. And on West Street in New York, and I can't claim I really met Lepke, but really, there. And he wasn't blood and thunder tall. My first night I spent with someone who'd been 13 years in the New Jersey jail, and he said, this is like a hotel. It didn't seem that way to me, but he also said, now Lepke, he wouldn't hurt a lamb. And he wouldn't. He just directed other people to. You can look on evil as a sort of zero. Maybe that's its most terrifying form. Avoid. Only teaching on Tuesdays. Bookworming in pajamas, fresh washer each morning. I hug a whole house on Boston's hardly passionate Marlborough Street, where even the man scavenging filth in the back alley trash cans has 2 children, a beach wagon, a helpmate, and is a young Republican. I have a 9-month daughter, young enough to be my granddaughter. Like the sun, she rises in her flame flamingo infant's wear. These are the tranquilized 50s. I'm 40. Ought I to regret my seed time? I was a fire-breathing Catholic CO and made my manic statement telling off the state and president. And then sat waiting sentences, bullpen, beside a Negro boy with curlicue marijuana in his hair. Given a year, I walked on the roof of the West Street jail, a short enclosure like my school soccer court, and saw the Hudson River once a day through sooty clothesline entanglements and bleaching, khaki-colored tenements. Strolling, I yammered metaphysics with Abramowitz, a jaundiced yellow, it's really tan, and flyweight pacifist. So vegetarian, he wore rope shoes and preferred fallen fruit. He tried to convert Bioff and Brown, the Hollywood pimps, to his diet. Hairy, muscular, suburban, wearing chocolate double-breasted suits, they blew their tops and beat him black and blue. I was so out of things I'd never heard of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Are you a CO? I asked a fellow jailbird. No, he answered, I'm a JW. He taught me the hospital tuck and pointed out the T-shirted back of Murder Incorporated czar Lepke, there piling towels on a rack or dawdling off to his little segregated cell full of things forbidden the common man. A portable radio, a dresser, 2 toy American flags tied together with a ribbon of Easter palm. Flabby, bald, lobotomized, he drifted in a sheepish calm where no agonizing reappraisal jarred his concentration on the electric chair, hanging like an oasis in his air of lost connections. I'll leave you on that note.